So we're here in your house in Arizona, Grandpa.
Okay.
2013. Let's see here. All right. All right. Well, I don't know. First things first. So, I don't know. Tell me about this house. Tell me about how long you've been here in Arizona. Why aren't you in Madison anymore?
Well, we came out to Arizona on an elder hostel program in Tucson,
Mm-hmm.
and people talked about Green Valley, so we drove out to Green Valley to see what it was like, and we were very impressed with it. And so we looked around. We found a place to rent. The next year we came out and rented for 2 months, and it was fairly expensive to rent for just a couple of months. We decided this was a wonderful place to retire, so we decided that we would buy a place. So we bought a place over in Altamira. We lived there for a year and then decided to build a house. And so we built the home that we're living in now.
This is, I can't remember the first time I visited out here, if it was in this house or a different house.
It probably was this house, because I don't think it came out when we lived on Altamira.
No.
And we were only there for a year, but we liked that little place, and so, but we needed a little more room, and so we built this house.
Yeah, I remember. I would say that, one of my earliest memories was running between Dad's house and
Oh,
your house.
yes, you and Kayla came around. I would come home, and you kids would come home, and when I got there, you'd run down, and you're ready to play, and sometimes I was so tired I couldn't keep up with you guys. You had so much energy.
Was that a property? Was that one piece of property? How did that work?
It was one parcel, and Kelly and I bought it together, and I said to Kelly, you take whatever half you want, and he chose the half that was up on the hill, and I had the one that was down below. So we both built homes and went from there.
Did the property get split at all, or how does that work?
Yeah, we bought it as one parcel and then split it so that he had half and I had half.
It would be a big piece of land to just...
It was a good chunk of land.
Yeah.
And nobody else could visualize building on it, I guess, and so it was idle there for a long time, and we got a good price on it.
Yeah, that must have been pretty cool to have your kid and your grandkid like right there.
Oh yeah, I'd love to have Kelly and you kids right next door to us, and Jamie and Kelly would go off sometimes, and we would babysit with Kayla and you. And
yeah, that was cool. I wonder if it's like your childhood a little bit. What do you remember? What is like the earliest thing that you remember from up in Colfax?
Well, I don't know. There's so many memories from Colfax. I think, in my mind, when we moved to Colfax, I was just about to enter high school. And of course, I was interested in athletics, and so I was excited to have a chance to compete in football and basketball if that was possible. And so I guess that's my earliest remembrance of Colfax.
You remember anything before that?
Oh yes, we lived in Stanley. That was when my dad was a cheesemaker in Stanley, Wisconsin, and so well, I suppose I was there until from kindergarten up through the 6th grade, and then we moved to Colfax and went through the 7th and 8th grade, and then I ended into high school in Colfax.
You were I saw a photo today of you guys, you and your brothers and sisters and your mom and dad.
Uh-huh.
You have 4 brothers and sisters? Is that right?
No, I had 3 brothers and 1 sister, yeah.
Okay. And you were the what? You were the...
I was the second. Jim was my older brother. He was 2 years older than I. And then about 10 years later, after I was born, Dick and Donna were born. They were twins. And so...
What did you guys do when you were kids? What did you guys do for fun?
Well, we'd get a hold of some cans, and we would step on them, and they would make a metal heel clip, and we would run down the street with making a lot of noise. We would get an old tire, and we would roll the tire down the street, and that was fun. We played a lot of kind of touch football, because we had a lot right next door. A lot of the kids came over to do that, and it was a different life than anything that exists now. There was no TV. And in fact, there really wasn't much radio at the early years. About the time that I got into high school, radio became popular. They even started having radio in cars. And so a lot of entertainment was listening to the radio. And but it was getting involved with the people in the area. And we played a lot of those silly games that kids play with Run Sheep Run, you know, and
This was in the 1930s, is that right? Or
yes, it was, yeah, about 1930, right.
is that the Depression?
The Depression was 1929, right, and everybody was lucky to have something to eat, you know. It was, Roosevelt established a lot of work programs, which was a good thing, and a lot of people in our community were on WPA, was Work Progress Administration, and at least it'd give them a living. We were lucky because my dad was the manager of the local creamery, and we were probably better off than a lot of people in the town who had very little of anything to do during the Depression.
So you guys had, your dad had your own business. He wasn't doing the cheese making at that point.
No. This was a creamery that made ice cream and butter, and they had milk routes. And later on, as we got older, my brother Jim and I used to deliver milk even before we went to school. We'd get up at 4:30 in the morning and load up the truck and deliver milk and get back by 8 o'clock and then on to school.
So you did that all before school?
Yeah, we did that before school. So
that's cool. So
but it was wonderful because, you know, we made 35 cents an hour, and that gave us a lot of spending money because a lot of the kids didn't have that. You know, well, it cost you, I don't know, 15, 20 cents to go to the movie. So everything was cheaper at that particular time.
Yeah, that's like...
And 35 cents an hour, we were just grateful to get that.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. Now, you're doing good, Grandpa. So he was a milkman, is that right? I mean, is that what you'd call it? I mean, when I think of milkman...
Well, Jim and I were milkmen. We were just part of the total structure. But what happened was that truckers would bring in milk from all around the countryside, where farmers would have their milk in big milk cans, and the truckers would come by, pick up the milk. They could bring it to the creamery, and it would be processed there. And we, as I told you before, my dad established a powdered milk plant in Stillwater, but his experience with the powdered milk industry was in Colfax, because they had a powdered milk plant there, and a lot of the milk that they got from the farmers all around the country went into making powdered milk. They would separate it, and the cream, of course, went into to making butter. And of course they had a milk route which furnished the milk and butter and cream to all the people in Colfax.
Yeah. So he was kind of a hot shot. I mean, he was a big deal, your dad. I mean, he owned this.
Well, he was one of the, well, not a big deal, but he was one of the important people in Colfax. And so he was well respected.
Yeah, you had several employees working for him, I bet.
Yes, there were several employees. It was funny. My brother Jim and I used to go down to the creamery, and they needed people to wrap butter. So we would sit there with some women, and Jim and I, we would wrap butter along with the rest of them. And after we had wrapped all the butter that was available to wrap for a particular day, there were all little scraps of butter around, you know. And we used to have butter fights. We would throw butter at each other. The whole place got real slippery, of course, from all the butter. And then one of the other employees, Russell Haas, would get out the steam hose, and he would steam it all down. Of course, it would all melt down and go down the drain. But
Butter fights.
we had butter fights.
How old were you back when you were helping your dad? You
Well,
were in high
that
school,
was
you're saying.
let's see, I was probably 15, 14, 15, yeah.
So Jim, I don't even know if I'm sure I've met Jim. I don't know. I don't
Well,
remember.
maybe not. My brother Jim eventually lived in Coral Gables, Florida, so he was a long ways away. And we only got to see each other when we would go down to Florida
Were you guys pretty close?
to visit. Very close, yeah. We used to double date a lot. In fact, he and I dated sisters in Colfax. He had dated with Ona Amble, and I had dated Carol Amble, and we went to St. Paul on one trip and took that paddle boat down the Mississippi and back. It was
Pretty juvenile.
yeah, juvenile, but it was a lot of fun for us.
Yeah, what was dating like back
Well,
in the day, I suppose?
it was the highlight of our day, of course, to be able to date someone, have someone love you and you love them, and so.
Were you like a hot shot? I mean, you showed me the photos of all the sports you did in high school.
No, I was not a hot shot.
Were you good at sports? Or?
I was good at sports. I was good at football. The coach thought enough about me to insist that I be the one to call the signals from whatever position I played. And
So that's not, I mean, obviously there's no radio in the helmet back then.
no. What would happen would be the coach would take me and he would go out on the field and he would say, now, here we are in the 30-yard line and it's second down and you got 6 yards to go. What would you call? And I would tell him what I would call, what play I would call. And he would say, yes, that's what you should do. Or he would tell me, no, you should have called this play, see? So he trained me into what I should do when I was out on the field.
So you were really calling the plays.
I was calling the plays. I called all the plays during my junior and senior year in high school.
And if you did it wrong, he got pissed at you.
No, he didn't. He never complained. We were successful because we were middle border champions in football. We played Menominee and Hudson and New Richmond. They were the teams that were in our conference.
Yeah. And so now then you went to college, right? I mean, you went to Madison or what?
Yes.
Madison or Illinois or
No, we went. Jim, my brother Jim, had gone to Eau Claire Teachers College his first year, and then the second year he went to Madison to the university. And since he was there, then that's where I went. I was 2 years behind him, so we lived in an apartment in Madison, and Jim worked at the Madison Club, which was a high-class eatery, and I worked at the Alpha Zeta Delta sorority as a waiter and set pins at the bowling alley at one of the girls' bowling alley places.
So you were hanging around.
And I mopped floors. We did anything to earn money so that we didn't cause a strain on Dad and Mother. You know, Dad and Mother paid for our tuition, and that was it, or our tuition and our books. And from there on, it was up to Jim and I to provide our board and room on our own. So it didn't cost Dad anything beyond that when we went to college.
So when did you, I mean, like, what were you interested in college? I mean, were you interested in architecture?
I was interested in sports. It was kind of silly. I just took a general course to begin with, but as I told you before, when I went out for football, shoot, it took about 3.5 hours by the time you walked out to the stadium, got dressed, worked out, undressed, showered, got back. You know, you lost 3.5 hours. And my studies just went downhill. I took a bookkeeping course and I got halfway through and I had to drop out because I wasn't making the grade.
This was in Madison?
This was in Madison, yeah.
So this was still Camp Randall?
Yeah, still Camp Randall, right.
So you played for the Wisconsin Badger football team?
No, I didn't play for them. I went out and competed, but I was not good enough to play on the team. Okay. And it was only during my freshman year anyway. Yeah. Even if I had stayed with it until I was a senior, I would have been a substitute, not a first. So
so the format was different than it is now. I mean, so people tried out for the team every year. It was all.
Yes.
There wasn't scholarships like there is now.
Well, no, there wasn't much in the way of scholarships. You just came. They would recruit you because they knew of your success in high school. So they would recruit you to come to the university, and you would try out. But they would have, you know, over 100 guys competing for the team, and it would boil down to maybe 20 or 25 that would actually make the team. And in those days, you usually played both ways. You didn't have a defensive team and an offensive team. You had, if you were a good athlete, you played offense and you played defense both.
They just picked the best athletes.
They just picked the best athletes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so different now, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really changed so much.
Yes, it has changed a lot, and of course, I think the game is probably more interesting now. But it was fun during those days.
Mm-hmm. So then, I don't know if I'm getting this wrong. So then you joined the military before college or after?
I was at the University of Wisconsin for 3 years, and then the war broke out.
World War II.
World War II. And we knew that we were going to be drafted soon, and we wanted to do something other than be in the infantry. So we signed up for the pilot training course, which was at the university. So we took ground school there, and we took flying out at Truex Field. And when we finished our course, we had an instructor's rating. So the Navy came along and said, we'll give you a commission to come into the Navy and teach flying. So then I went down to Corpus Christi and went through their training course for about 3 months, and then they put us to work and sent me out to Pasco, Washington as a flight instructor.
This was in the middle of college. I mean, like in the...
Yeah, I gave up college. You know, I had 3 years at the University of Wisconsin, but as soon as the war broke out, we took the pilot training course and dropped out of all other studies. and pursued that.
Wow.
So
the war really just changed everything.
oh, it changed everything. Everybody was involved in the war one way or another, you know.
Women, men.
Women and men, yeah, because so many of the men went off to war. A lot of the women had to take up the job of producing ammunition and guns and aircraft, airplanes rather, and
So did you know what was happening overseas with Hitler and all this
oh
stuff?
yes, of course we read the papers. We knew everything that was happening, and you know I remember all those things yet to this day. All the names of the hierarchy in Germany and all of our leaders in Washington.
I mean, what was the overall feeling? Did people not want to get involved in the war, or
No. It wasn't like Vietnam. There was no resistance to the war. We knew that we had to stop Hitler and the German army, or they'd take over all of Europe, which they almost did. And so everybody was behind it. Roosevelt tried to keep us out of war as long as he could, but of course when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, then we were in the war with both Germany and Japan.
Mm. Now, was there like this? It seems like when I think to like Hitler now, or like World War II, like there's this like moral sort of. There's this moral stance that like the anti-Semitism, you know. I mean, did you feel bad for the Jews? I guess
We didn't know what was happening. At least some of the hierarchy people may have known it, but it was not revealed to the general public. We never knew until after the war about the Holocaust, about all the Jews that were murdered. And
so then why was there this hatred towards, or why was there this feeling of we gotta stop Hitler and the Germans?
well, because Hitler was determined to have he felt the Germans were the master race, that they really were superior to everyone else. And of course there were an awful lot of Jews in Germany and Poland and Austria, and the Jews, many of the Jews were in a dominant position as far as the banks were concerned, as far as being the head of business and so forth. And this irritated Hitler. He couldn't stand to think that the Jewish people were superior to the Germans. And he was determined to eliminate all of the Jews in Europe. And he wanted Germany to be dominant over all of Europe. And he almost became successful when he invaded Russia. He had already invaded France and Czechoslovakia and Romania and was in control of that. And when they had the access with Italy, of course, between Italy and Germany, they really had control of Central Europe.
Mm-hmm. So then you were over here. You learned how to fly in Washington. Is that right? And then, or did you think you were going to go overseas, or you didn't?
Oh yes, everybody thought we were going to go overseas. It was just a matter of time, before you got orders to leave the instructing and be assigned to overseas.
Did you want to go overseas?
Yes. We wanted to go overseas. We wanted to be a fighter pilot. And as it turned out, I got orders to go to Naval Air Transport, which meant that I would be transporting airplanes from the United States to the theater of war against Japan. And then when they used atomic bombs, the war ended, and so I never did get overseas.
Did you hate, what was the feeling? Was there more hate towards the Japanese or the Germans? Do you remember?
I don't remember that there was I suppose there was more hate against the Japanese because they were the ones that inflicted the most damage on the United States. And in fact, there were a lot of Germans who were captured and brought into the United States and put in an internment camp, and they were treated very well. And in fact, many of the pilots who fought in Germany, if the airplane crashed, they parachuted into German hands, they were treated well by the Germans too, generally. It was entirely different with the Japanese. The Japanese treated American prisoners horribly.
Yeah.
So
in retrospect, are you pretty glad that you didn't fight in the war? Or, I mean, do you wish that you would?
I'm glad I survived when I think of of the many friends that I had in high school that went overseas as infantrymen or artillerymen and didn't come back. I mean, you had to consider yourself damn lucky to be alive after the war was over.
So then did you remain in the military, teaching still? I mean, you taught these pilots that did go overseas.
Yes.
Did you keep training, or once the war was over, you kind of just...
No, once the war was over, of course, we were anxious to get back to our normal life. And so we had a choice, perhaps, of continuing in the Navy or asking for retirement from the Navy. And so as soon as I was able to get out, I asked to get out so I could go back to school. And I went back to Illinois and decided to go into architecture. And that was...
You finished up in Champaign, huh?
I finished up in Champaign, and it was wonderful because you have to give the government credit. We were on the GI Bill, so that they were able to pay for our lodging and our schooling to go to school on the GI Bill. We had a small apartment in an old Army barracks that was built on the campus there at Champaign-Urbana, and we lived there and had 2 children there while I was going to school, and I taught flying at the University of Illinois because they had an airport and a flight program for students even after the war. And so since I was qualified, it was a good chance to make some money to supplement the government support.
So were you a pretty good pilot? Did you like flying? I mean...
Well, I couldn't say I was a good pilot. I was an average pilot, I guess, like so many others.
Good enough to teach, though, huh?
Yes, you had to pass tests, of course, to be able to do the teaching. Sure. But
so when did you sort of famously? What was that? Where you flew the plane under the bridge with that gal?
Oh, that was...
Tell me about that.
Well, that was...
I've heard it before. But.
Yeah, you've heard it before. It's an interesting story. The commanding officer at Pasco, Washington, decided that everyone on the base should understand the syllabus to know what was being taught to the Navy cadets. So he said the parachute packers and the mechanics and the waves who were doing the office work at the base would all go down to the flight line, and they would be assigned to an airplane with an instructor. We would go up and teach them, or not teach them, but show them what we were teaching the Navy cadets. So we went down to the flight line, and I was assigned a Navy wave who was an assistant to the commanding officer. And we went up and we shot a few landings and takeoffs to show what we were trying to do, to explain to the cadets that if you're going to be on a carrier, you have to land with all your power off and with your tail down so you'd catch the hook on the carrier. And so we shot a few landings and takeoffs, and then I took her up to a higher altitude, and we did a loop. And
Who was this gal now?
this gal was a wave, and she was assistant to the commanding officer.
Good looking gal. I mean, yeah.
Well, I don't even remember that. I suppose all girls were good looking at that time because there was a scarcity of women. So anyway, we did a slow roll and a snap roll and an Immelman and different maneuvers. And you know, sometimes when you go up with a student and you get into these violent maneuvers, they get sick. But this gal, she just loved it. She just thought it was wonderful. And everything I did, she just was thrilled, you know. So we did a spin, and then we did an inverted spin. An inverted spin is when the centrifugal force throws you to the outside of the airplane. You have to have your safety belt on real tight, otherwise you're hanging half out of the airplane.
Yeah. Oh, because was there a cover over it?
No, it was open cockpit.
Open cockpit.
Open cockpit, yeah. So we did inverted spin, and she even loved that. And there wasn't much more I could do. I had gone through all the maneuvers that we teach, and there was a Snake River there near Yakima, Washington, and there's a bridge across the Snake River. I said, "Would you like to fly down underneath the bridge?" Oh, she nodded her head, yes, we'd love to do it. So I went down, and we flew underneath the bridge and came up the other side.
Pretty dangerous maneuver.
Well, it wasn't really that dangerous. You know, it was a small airplane, and you had pretty good control. And of course, when we came up the other side, there were other airplanes in the area because the whole flight line was out, you know, doing the same thing I was doing. And so someone got my number, my airplane, and reported it back to base. And as soon as we got back to the base, there was a sign on the ready board for Klund to see the commanding officer. And of course, I knew what we had done wrong.
Yeah.
So when I changed my clothes and went back to the administration building, and commanding officer, he ate me out a little bit, told me that it was absolutely against the rules to be doing what I had done. Mm-hmm. And he felt that he really needed to discipline me some way or other because everybody in the squadron knew what I had done. So he said, "I have to confine you to the base for 3 days," which was really not anything, because you stayed at the bachelor officers' quarters and you lived a nice life. You just couldn't go off the base. And the only reason that they didn't do more, I think, was because the gal that the Navy wave that I was, who was flying with me in the airplane, had gotten back to the commanding officer before I was there and told him what a thrilling ride she had had, you know. And so the commanding officer felt, well, he didn't want to go against what his Navy wave assistant had told him. So he said, "You know, Klund," he said, "it's going to cost you a bottle of scotch," and that was my punishment.
The military was much different back then, I suppose, huh, than it is now.
Well, it's not much different. I don't know.
I mean, is there still like a brotherhood with you guys?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. They just, everybody that's in the service, they're there because all their friends are there with them, and they're fighting for your back, and you're fighting for his back.
Yeah.
They were all, it's their life. That's.
Now, when you taught some of these people that went overseas, did you know about when they were lost at war? I mean, or did you were they just faces, you know? Like the guys that you were teaching that ended up going overseas?
You don't remember. See, because you had so many that went through the training program, you wouldn't remember the names of those people, but the ones you would remember were the ones who were in high school with you and went into service. Like two of my good friends went into the Army, and they both went into flying as well. Tuffy Peterson was a dive bomber, and Dwayne was flew B-17s. And so you knew if something happened to them, that would be news to you. Some of the other people who were in high school with me who went into the infantry and were killed, then you would know about that, but only through the newspaper that would report their death.
So, tell me about. So, when did you meet Grandma Phyllis? When was that? And
well, we were in training for a cross-country flight in St. Paul. This was part of our training before going into the Navy. We went out to the Buckhorn Inn, which was just across the river from Stillwater, and Phyllis was there with some other girls, and I was there with 3 or 4 other fellas who were in flight training with me. And we got to talking, and she told me that she was a credit manager at the Cook's Clothing Store in St. Paul. And so we got on, I think I was impressed with her, and I don't know if she was impressed with me, but at least she agreed to go out with me. So then I called on her, and we had a date after that, and it just progressed from there.
How old were you? Were you in your 20s? I mean, early 20s, obviously.
Probably 22. Probably 22.
She was older than you, right?
She was older. She was about 6 or 7 years older than I am.
But you didn't know it.
I didn't know it. She would never tell me. I never know to this day what her actual birth date is.
That seems so strange. But no, it was. What did Phyllis look like back? I mean, was she?
Oh, she was very, very good looking. In fact, she was, when they had the ice carnival in St. Paul, which they have every year, she was the queen of, not for the whole spectacle, but queen for Cook's Clothing Store, and she was in the parade as a queen for the Cook's Clothing Store float. And
so then you guys dated for a while. What made you want to get married to her, I guess?
well, I think everybody wanted to get married. You didn't know if your life was going to be for another year or 2 years or whatever.
Because this was right before the war.
Yeah, I hadn't got into the Navy yet at that particular time. But we did date, and after I went down to Corpus Christi and went through the syllabus down there to learn how they wanted us to perform, we kept in touch. And when I had a few days leave in between orders from Corpus Christi to Pasco, Washington, I came back to Stillwater, and we went out, and I asked her to marry me, and she said she would, and so I went out to Pasco, Washington, and about 2 or 3 months later, she came out with my mother and my aunt, and we were married there on the base in Pasco.
So how long had you been dating her, or had been seeing her before you got married to her?
I would guess 6 months, maybe.
Not long.
Not long, no.
It was just that's just kind of how it went back then? Or?
Yes, that's how it went.
6 months.
Well, not really. Mine was probably a little different than many, because many of the guys that went in the war had high school sweethearts, and they married them before they went off to war. Some of them came back and lived a wonderful life, and others died on the battlefield, and that was it.
So you met. Now, I don't even know. Was she married before you? Was that the deal, or no?
Phyllis?
Yeah.
No, she wasn't married. No, she'd never been married.
So she was kind of getting at the age where she was getting a little older, probably, and really wanted to get married as well.
Well, she lived with her mother and dad in Stillwater, and I think she felt obligated to help them, to be with them. Whether that was a deterrence for getting married to someone else before I met her, I don't know. But at least that was part of the problem. So she was very content in living at home with her mother and dad and helping them out, and probably dating other guys, before I met her. And
But you were the one. So then she came out to Washington, and then it wasn't long before Jan was born. Is that right?
yeah, then, well, it was quite some time after that, because I was stationed at Pasco for probably a year, and then I was transferred down to Pensacola, and that was where Jan was born.
It was in Florida.
She probably got pregnant while I was at Pasco, but then when I was transferred to Pensacola, Jan was born down there.
Mm-hmm. And then when did you guys end up? And then Cindy was born in Madison?
Cindy was born in St. Paul, and I was in the service, and Phyllis came back, of course, to Stillwater, and to have support from her family and from my family. And so Cindy was born in St. Paul. Mm-hmm. I wasn't there to be there when she was born.
And then it was a few more years. It was 4 years, right, till Carson was born.
No, it was 2 years later than Carson. Then after Cindy was born, the war ended, and then I went to Illinois to go to school, and then Carson was born in Urbana, Illinois. That was 2 years later, and then 4 years after that, I was through with school and back in Madison, and so Kelly was born in Madison.
So, yeah, so, I mean, so you guys ended up building a house in Madison that won on Black Hawk?
Yeah. Marv Foster and I, again, it was a chance to buy some property that nobody wanted. It was in a gully. We bought, Marv Foster and I each bought a lot in the gully, $300 a piece for the lot. And nobody else could see the possibility of building anything there. So I went ahead and built a house, and then designed a house for Marv, and Marv built a house there. And
who's Marv?
Marv Foster. He was just a friend that I knew from college.
So he was a builder?
No, he wasn't a builder. He was. He handled most of the recreation and drama at the University of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. He was instrumental in a lot of plays that were produced.
So you built that house. That was kind of your sort of architectural style. I mean, you've already developed that style by the time you built that house, right?
Yeah, I guess you would say that.
I mean, it seems like the architecture, to me, being a novice, but it seems like it was similar architecture to, kind of the place we're in now or whatever. I mean, you got the same sort of
Frank Lloyd Wright was an idol of all of us, because he was so involved with aesthetics. We thought a lot of the things that he produced were way ahead of his time, and a lot of us tried to create our architecture that would be reminiscent of what he might do. And I suppose that influenced me a great deal.
Yeah, so you kind of always had a style similar
Right.
to Frank Lloyd Wright. Yeah. No, that's cool. So then you built that house on Black Hawk, and the kids grew up there. I mean,
Yes.
At what point did things sort of, I don't even know when you ended up divorcing Phyllis. I mean, was that after the kids had grown up, or?
Well, yeah, the kids were all Jan had gone to college at Platteville. Cindy, Kelly was still involved in the music school at Madison. It's one of those things. Architecture was my whole life. I would get up in the morning at 4 o'clock sometimes, and I would go down to the office and I would start working. And I would work all day long, and sometimes I wouldn't even get home for supper because I would be involved in the work. It was very irritating for Phyllis because she didn't get any attention at all. My whole life was creating buildings and solving architectural problems. And so I think we just grew apart. As far as Phyllis was concerned, her whole life was the kids. I mean, that was the important thing for her. And I don't think she gave me much attention because I didn't give her much attention. And so that was a bad situation for a happy marriage. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of things as the kids were growing up. And I loved Phyllis very much. But it just got to the point where she was going one way, I was going another way, and we decided the best thing to do was to divorce.
What are some of the great things that you remember about Phyllis? What were some of those fun things that you did? I mean, I don't remember. I mean, I remember being a little kid with Phyllis, but I don't remember her when she was vibrant and young and anything like that. How would you?
Well, we went to a lot of parties. We got drunk together. And we enjoyed Christmases particularly. We both got a thrill out of having Christmas and preparing the Christmas tree and buying presents for the kids and seeing their reaction when they woke up and saw what Santa Claus had brought. So that was a big joy in our life, was just making sure the kids were having fun.
Yeah, that's cool. Now I know that you did architecture in school. Like, at what point, like, did you start your own business? Was that difficult to do? I mean,
well, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because in order to start your own business, you have to go out and get a client who wants you to design something for them. And that's a struggle in itself because you don't have anything to point to. You'd say, I haven't done this or I haven't done anything like that. It's, say, your first commission. And I was working for John Flad for 3 years, but I was doing a lot of work on the side. I was designing a lot of homes during free hours in the evening. And when I decided to go on my own, I went out and talked to a couple of school boards, and I guess they were impressed with what I told them, and they decided to award me the job. And so once you get the job, you're not going to get any pay, you see, until the thing is pretty well developed. So you may have 6 months there where you have no income at all. And here you are trying to start a business and feed your family, and what are you doing for income? So the way I was able to do it was because I was doing a lot of residence on the side, and I was still able to do that while I was looking for bigger commissions like a school job. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I got started in my own business.
What was your biggest project? What was like the crown jewel of your entire career in architecture? You did a lot of homes and you did some schools, right? I mean, I know you did several schools.
Well, there were a lot of things that were highlighted. We did. I'll tell you about a school that we did in Cedar Grove, Wisconsin, and the school board loved the school so much.
The design?
The design, yeah. That it was the information about the school was broadcast to other school districts in that area. And one of the other school districts hired a different architect. The architect came into my office. He wanted the plans that we had for the Cedar Grove School because their school board was interested in doing something very similar. Of course, I wouldn't give them the plans. Another thing was we did a school in Madison, and the only time in the history of the schools in Madison that they ever duplicated another school on another site was one that I designed. We designed an elementary school, the Muir School, and the school board in Madison felt it was such a perfect solution for what they wanted that they wanted to duplicate it exactly on another site on the east side of town, which they did, which was fine with me. So one other thing that was probably noteworthy was you knew that Frank Lloyd Wright was an idol of mine, and we were interviewed for a job at Spring Green, and of course the Taliesin Fellowship was in competition to design the high school at Spring Green. But in the final analysis, the school board decided they wanted me to design the school. And so we felt really good about that because the competition was pretty tough. And in fact, my old boss from John Fladd was a competitor to design that school too. Mm-hmm. And I was able to get the job rather than Fladd or Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright was your competition?
Well, no, Frank Lloyd Wright had died at that particular time, but the Taliesin Fellowship continued with the same type of work that Frank Lloyd Wright had instituted at the
I see. Yeah.
Taliesin.
So what was it about? Like your architectural style that lent itself to?
It really wasn't a style. It was just a matter of. It's just a matter of gathering up the information that your client wanted to incorporate into the design, and then sitting down and solving that problem. For instance, we did a house for San Filippo, the San Filippo Funeral Home there in Madison, and he wanted a French provincial house. Well, it's nothing that I would design if somebody gave me free rein, but this was his desire and his wife's desire, so I designed a French provincial house. And he was extremely happy with it, and it's still there, of course, right in the back of the funeral home.
So if you go, how many buildings did you design in Madison? I mean, that was mostly where you were doing your work, was in Madison.
Well, no, we did a lot of work out, schools all over the lower part of Wisconsin. Probably, I would guess, probably 60 schools. We did high schools in Muscoda, Cambridge, McFarland. You know, just one led to another.
Did you have anybody working for you?
Oh yes, we had about 5 people in the office that were helping to turn out the drawings.
5 architects?
Well, I would say 3 of them were architects, 2 of them were draftsmen, and then we had a secretary too, of course.
Mm-hmm. Was it difficult being, somebody, the person in charge of these people? I mean, is there sort of a, I don't know, is there any anxiety with being the person that has to write the paycheck, so to speak? And
no, nothing like that. I think in our particular profession, everyone wants to be on their own. And at one time, we had an awful lot of work in the office. We had the high school to do, at Boston and several other projects. And the three guys who were architects decided they wanted to set up a business of their own. So they left my office when we had all of this work to do. And so they set up a business of their own, and I continued to struggle to get out all the work that I had to do. Well, no, I was able to get another couple of guys to come in and help, but it was still a lot to do because I had to do a lot of it myself. But then the surprising thing was that after about 2 years, the three guys that had set up their own business went bankrupt.
All right, so I'm wondering now. You showed me those photos of the Picasso thing earlier. That was just something. I mean, were you? And then I remember you playing piano when I was a kid, and you're an artist and you're a good athlete. You're sort of a Renaissance man, so to speak. I don't know. Maybe you don't consider yourself one, but how did you get so good at the arts? You know,
I'm not good at arts.
Well, you did. You remade a Picasso.
Well, those paintings, when I look at other people who can paint from scratch, that is really artistry. And we have a book on Norman Rockwell, of course, and his art is fantastic. He paints an image, but he tells a story with his paintings. My simple paintings were just a copy of something that was done before. That's all it is.
And you're probably good with at least your architecture is a certain sort of art.
Well, yeah, you have to have a little artistic talent. I do a little stained glass. You probably noticed some of the windows around here, and I had in the other house. And I play a little the piano by ear. And I do a lot of things, but I don't do very many of them well. So
a little bit of everything. One of the earliest memories I have of you is playing the piano at Mom and Dad's house in that across the bridge.
Oh yes.
Remember in that house?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you were babysitting us and you just kind of sat down and started playing the piano.
Yeah. Well, I just play mainly by ear. I can't read any notes at all. So if there's a melody in my head, I usually can sit down and play it on the piano.
Without practicing? I mean, you just sit down and...
Well, you struggle maybe a little bit because you carry the tune in your mind and you have to transpose it onto the piano, and you'll make some mistakes, but then you correct them, and after a little while you can play the piece.
How'd you learn how to play the piano?
Well, when I was when we lived in Stanley, Wisconsin, I was just like a first grader or something. I took some piano lessons, and so I learned how to use the fingering but I never was interested enough to be able to read the notes. And then when we moved, I gave it up from there. So.
Well, you could always kind of sit down and figure it out if you had to.
Yeah, but if you really want to hear something that's good on the piano, Carson composed a piece and he put it on a CD. I'll let you listen to it after we finish here.
Yeah.
I hesitate to even touch the piano after listening to him because he is so good. And of course, your dad is good at what he does too. It's the perfectionism that both of them want to instill in their work. Your dad is, in everything he does, he wants it to be perfect. And that's a wonderful faculty. So
I do have a question. I want to know. So now, after the kids grew up, how did now I know you loaned them some money for the stone hearth.
What happened was that when Jan was at the University of Ohio State, there was a college club that he visited, and it was so popular with the kids in Ohio State that he thought when he got out of school, he would like to do something similar in Madison. So when he came back, he talked to me. He said, "Dad, I think we can really do well if we had a place where we could introduce top-notch bands and invite the college kids to come in and dance." And so we looked around and we found a garage that was right on Park Street, which was only about 2 blocks away from the center of Madison campus. And so he didn't have any money, and I had enough money that I was able to buy the building and get them started. So he and Cindy got together, and Jan was wonderful about recreating this garage into something that would be attractive to college kids. So he went out and bought a lot of old barn planks and brought them in, and then modeled the whole inside of the garage, and put in some fireplaces for a little more atmosphere. Cindy was good at finding good bands, like they had B.B. King come in there and people like that would come in, and the college kids loved it. So then once they got established, it really started to make money. And so Carson and Kelly both got involved because it was a big enough business that all four could be involved in it. And so that's the way it grew from there.
Did you ever see any that they obviously paid you back for the building? Or no, that was your...
No, they didn't pay me back for the building. What happened was that since it was Jan's idea and Cindy was most helpful in it, they wanted, they thought it was theirs. I said, no, it's not yours, because you are two of the people that have made this a success. But there's also a third person, which is me, that put up the money to establish it. So I said, what will happen would be that the investment that I have made in the building is going to be given to all four of you. So I've said Kelly and Carson are going to have to be involved. You, Jan, and Cindy were more instrumental. You get twice as much as Carson and Kelly. But if you equate it on the basis of stock exchange, then that's the way it was settled. I took my interest out of the enterprise, gave it to all four, and Carson and Kelly didn't benefit as much as Jan and Cindy did, because they were really instrumental in making it a success.
Yeah, and Cindy and Jan were able to take that sort of success and parlay that into their own, whatever they ended up doing.
Yeah, right. They'd give them a nest egg so that Jan was able to go out and buy some real estate. Cindy did the same thing. Cindy worked 2 jobs. She worked at the Playboy Club, and then she also worked various jobs in Madison. So she had 2 jobs going to save money, and they both were very frugal. So they had a nest egg to start with, and Cindy bought an apartment building, Jan bought apartment buildings, and they were so industrious that they did a lot of the work themselves, like all the painting and reconditioning of some of the buildings, and tearing out old carpet and redoing the carpet. They all did it themselves.
Did you teach them kind of how to do all this, or is it?
No. They acquired that on their own. They just had that ability. I didn't teach them anything.
So, so when the bar was open, you didn't.
I didn't oversee any of it. No.
No.
Phyllis did. Phyllis kept the books for him, because you had to have records for all the employees and so forth that they paid, and so on. Phyllis did a good job at that.
You must have been pretty proud of successful as it ended up being.
Oh yeah, I think the kids did great. And you know, it's so hard for a family when you get 4 people involved and each of them got different ideas. And they had arguments, of course, but they worked it out and did it for the good of the whole. And so it ended up being very successful.
Yeah, that's cool. And then there's a couple other things I want to ask you about. One is Arlene. So as long as I've been alive, you know, Arlene, I've considered her, you know, a grandmother of mine.
Yeah,
because she's been around my entire life.
Sure.
So I'm interested in her too. When did you meet Arlene? You know, what part in your life was that?
Well, I had separated from Phyllis at the time, so I went to a dance where it was parents without partners, and I was with another girl, and we were sitting at the table, and Arlene was at the same table. She didn't have an escort; she was with another girl, and the date I was with went to the bathroom. And while she was gone, I asked Arlene to dance. I thought, gee, that gal is somebody I want to really know. So we went to dance, and then when my date came back to the table, I brought Phyllis back. That was about the end of it. And so the next day I was trying to look up her number. I knew her name was Hanson. When you look in the telephone book, there are about 1 million Hansons. And I didn't know who to call, but I started down the list, and I finally got Arlene's number and asked her to go out on a date after that first dance that we had, and things just progressed from there.
How long ago was that? How long ago?
Well, it's about 35 years ago, I guess.
So you were, you was in the later, you were in your, what, 50s?
Let's see, 90, 80, 70, 60. No, I was probably 60.
60?
In the 60s, yeah. So Arlene and I have been together every day for over 30 years, since the first time we met.
You've seen her every day?
Every day we've been together. There was only one time when she went down to Texas because one of her relatives was getting married and I didn't go. But otherwise we've been together every day, and I enjoy being with her even today. She's been just a wonderful companion.
What exactly about her did you, what sort of attracted you to her?
Well, in the first place, she was very beautiful, had a wonderful shape. That's the first thing that you see, of course. And then the fact that she is so down to earth and so loyal. I mean, you knew that if she was going to go and be a partner, that was going to be her life, and she's not interested in anybody else. So we've had a wonderful relationship.
Younger woman too, huh?
No, well, she's younger by 4 years. Yeah, she's 89 now, and I'm 93, so.
That's cool. Well, a couple of so about your grandkids. So Casey was the first to be born. Casey and Pat, and then me about the same time as Pat. Yeah, I remember. And then Kayla, obviously. Yeah. But I mean, what was it like to have grandkids? You know, I mean, especially everybody being in Madison together.
Well, we were thrilled, of course, to have grandkids, as grandparents always are. I mean, we just thought that you and Kayla were fantastic, and then to be living right next door to us, it was more than you could even imagine. You know, those things don't happen very often. When your son or daughter gets married, they really move away somewhere, and so you have a commute problem in order to see your grandchildren. But here you were with Kayla, and we were right next door. We could see you every day. You had a swing set up there. We'd go up there and watch you on the swing and the slide. then you would come down through the woods to our house, and we just loved having you.
Yeah, was it every day that you saw us?
Well, I don't remember if it was every day, but we saw a lot of you because you were close.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Jamie and Kelly were involved in their schoolwork and getting their master's degrees and so on. So any break they could have to have us take care of the children, that was fine with them because it gave them a chance to concentrate on what was important to them too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
cool. Well, I don't really have much else for you, but I'm wondering if you know, we celebrated Arlene's birthday, but you're about to be 93. What, you know, if you could have anybody just, you know, what would you want to be remembered for most of all, you know, throughout the whole course of your life? I mean, there's so many different things that you were a part of, but, you know, is there anything that you want to be remembered for?
There's nothing special. It's just, we've had a wonderful life, and we had a wonderful relationship. I'm so proud of all the kids being healthy and good kids. You know, we didn't have any, you have some problems, of course every family does, but nothing really serious. I couldn't ask for a better life. It's just been good. But like, who was it? Was it MacArthur said, old soldiers, they just fade away, and I think that's the way it should be with me. Soon I'll be gone, and you'll have your lives to enjoy for the rest of many, many years. So.
Yeah, I think you're going to be around for a while. You're in such good health.
Well, I might last for a few more. Months, maybe.
Oh, no.
Years.